Hello and welcome to our WVIK QCSO Signature Series preview. I'm Brian Baxter, the Quad City Symphony Executive Director, and today I'm really excited to be joined by our wonderful QCSO artists who are performing on our next Signature Series concert. Our Associate Concertmaster, Emily Nash, our violist, Bruno Silva, and Associate Principal Bass, Kit Polen. Welcome.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're so excited that you guys are performing this program. So this program's happening Saturday, February 27th at 7:30 p.m. And you can join these fine musicians at the Figge Art Museum in person. We'll have a very limited number of tickets available for that, or virtually through digital access. For this performance entitled For America, which is inspired by the Figge Art Museum's For America exhibition. So before we discuss this really exciting program, I think, I want to ask you all, as musicians, performing musicians, what it's been like to perform in this pandemic environment and what it means to be able to make music live now, however different it has been now, what, a year almost since this whole pandemic started.
Yeah, I feel like we've been so lucky to continue to be able to play music together during this time, especially when so many orchestras have stopped all concerts, which many of our friends and our own, second orchestras have just stopped. Things are very different right now playing together on stage still. Like I really miss having my stand partner. Without sitting with somebody, you feel so much more exposed. And since we're far apart, it's much harder to hear and play together. And like with having an instrument that's under your face, masks have been trial and error to find something comfortable to play with. And also like recently when we haven't been playing with an audience, now playing through the program it's really fun to play through, but it actually just, to me, feels sort of like a dress rehearsal. And then we go home. So I didn't realize how much it meant to have the audience there to share music with. And we're excited to actually play for a live audience for this concert. It means like the world that we can come together and share and listen.
We're very fortunate to have worked with Uriomai in the Civic Orchestra, and he often talks about the meaning of music and importance of music in a community, and how music ties people together. And I believe in times like this, people are in search of soulful meaning in life, and I believe that music is that. Very, very much looking forward to connecting with a live audience and sharing the joy of music.
Yeah, I think this pandemic has really changed mine, and I think a lot of people's. I think it's changed our relationship with the arts and with music. And so it's made you rethink, or it's made me rethink a lot of things. Before a year ago, it's really hard as a musician sometimes to turn off. You're kind of, since anytime you have a career, hobby, passion that's all intertwined like this, you don't really have time away from it. And this pandemic has really taken the career aspect out of the equation, and you're left with just the passion and the hobby. And it's been really interesting what I've turned to with the arts and with my playing. There've been a lot of days where I haven't felt like I needed to pick up my instrument, and there's been a lot of days where I have spent just all day playing, and it's kind of run the gamut throughout the pandemic. And so it's really made me think, since I don't always have something to play, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, now it's up to me to decide what I want to play. And that's been really interesting, or what I just want to listen to. The music that I've kept on in my home has been very different than music that I was drawn to. Well, not very different, but it's different. I'm drawn to more, calming music. I don't like the bombastic, um, symphonies, romantic symphonies like I used to. I'm drawn to more calming sounds or soothing music. And then when the fall came, we got to start performing again, which was amazing, and it really changed how I approached it, and why we need the arts, why we need these concerts. You know, are we just performing for ourselves when there's not an audience there? But then I started tuning into a lot of other live streamed concerts, and I found that I did still feel a bit of the connection, um, or I really, maybe I convinced myself that I felt the connection through the live stream, that you kind of wanted to be with other people, because I think that's what makes music the best, is when you can share the joy with other people. That's when it becomes the most exciting. I don't know if any of you were watching the inauguration, um, but when Garth Brooks invited the audience, or invited the listeners, you know, the online or TV listeners, to sing along with Amazing Grace. When he first said it, I didn't expect myself. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. But immediately, like, I just started singing along, and I felt this like really powerful connection that I didn't expect at all. Um, and it was just a really cool thing. And it just showed me how much I miss making music with others, every single week. And so the times that we do get a chance to make this music is really, really special now. And I think the times that when we can get the audience back in a few weeks, I think that's going to be even more powerful.
Wow, wow, those are really great responses, and I certainly like. I'm thinking like to me like the whole music experience, the concert experience. It's such a, you know, it's a community experience. It's a social experience. You know, it's not just like the music doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It's not sort of this own little thing that we just pull out when we perform, but it exists because of all these connections. And I know for sure I will never take for granted a live music experience again. At least I hope I never do, because it's certainly been an interesting year from that perspective. So I appreciate you guys sharing all of that. Now, Kit, you mentioned diversity of music, and maybe listening to different things during the pandemic. I feel like this concert, the whole of this concert, has a lot of different types of music. I mean, we've got Mozart to the music of Edgar Meyer and Mark O'Connor, inspired by a lot of American folk traditions. So it's kind of all over the map. So I think there's something in here that can relate to everyone. But I think why don't we start with Emily and Bruno, and we talk about the first half of the show, where we're featuring violin viola duos,
Yeah.
the husband and wife team of Emily and Bruno. So the first piece is Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's first duo in G major. And I understand that Mozart was pretty good at violin and viola, and perhaps he demonstrated those skills in this piece. I'm wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about how the two instruments interact, and maybe how he approached writing for the two of them.
Yes, the duo was written right after Mozart wrote his first quartet of the set of six he wrote, dedicated to his teacher Haydn. And he often played in a group with his teacher Haydn and other composers at the time, as Dittersdorf and Van Hal. And they did it for fun. Mozart was trying to show off his skills to his teacher Haydn. And he had a lot of very interesting viola interactions, where the viola used to have a lot of very interesting parts, which Mozart was playing the viola in the quartet. So as you go along those quartets, you can see that there's a lot more use of chromatic steps, and the viola part becomes more and more important. And it's what he applied also for the duet. You can see that the viola has almost as many 16th notes as the violin, and you know, there's a lot of interruptions and call and response, and it's a very unusual duet for the time. If you look at other duets, even written by Mozart or Haydn, they don't have that kind of interaction. The viola is a lot of times just being as an accompaniment part.
Eighth notes.
Eighth notes. And it's really interesting to see that kind of interaction, and you can see how personal that feels, and it feels like a conversation.
Yep. For anyone, I saw this connection, but for anyone that heard our concert this past weekend, the duo is in the same key as the Mozart violin concerto that was played by Linda, and it actually opens with the same big G major chord that is the first note of the solo violin part. So that's just kind of a fun connection, and I think it's the same key.
It's the same key as the first quartet he wrote of
Bruno
the set of
was
6 that he wrote for his teacher Haydn.
So he likes yes.
Yeah.
And the duo is really playful, and we take turns like ending phrases and setting up new ones. And oftentimes when we're practicing together, we actually end up like laughing so hard and we stop because it's like this playful connection or interruptions that happen. It's really fun. They're funny spots.
Just feel like a real life conversation or interaction you'd have, you know, and it works so perfectly for a married couple.
Hopefully we get through the performance without laughing.
Well, I think it'd be fun if you laugh during the performance. That's great. That's great. Yeah, really, it is a really fun piece. I think the audience will really enjoy it. And for those listening, you guys were talking about our Masterworks concert at the beginning of February that featured Linda Fan on the Mozart concerto.
Yes.
His first concerto, right? Is that his first?
Yeah. So his third, but
third. Okay.
But that's the
same key.
That's the first famous one.
Yeah, the first famous
one is the third.
Yeah.
So the second work, now we start to get into the American. Augusta Reed Thomas wrote the second work you all are doing. And for our listeners and our audience out there that are not familiar with Augusta Reed Thomas's work, or Gusty as she is also known, she's an incredibly prolific contemporary American composer based in Chicago. And interestingly, this duo, Silent Moon, was written for Almeda and Roland Vamos, who are a well-known husband and wife kind of teaching duo, I guess. I was wondering if you guys could tell us all about your relationship with the Vamoses and you know, what it means to the two of you. You mentioned being a married couple playing music. You know, how does all that interaction work, and maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. The Vamoses have been a part of my life in some capacity for probably about like 20 years in some way. My first like major teacher, Fiona Murray, was a student of the Vamoses. And she was my teacher through all those tough teenage years. She really got me through a lot of stuff, and I'm so grateful for her. And I'm skipping a couple years here, but then I went on to U of I to study with Simine Ganatra, and she is Mrs. Vamos's daughter-in-law. And then I went on to audition at Northwestern and had my trial lesson with Mrs. Vamos, and she would call me her grand student because I was already taking lessons from her former students or relatives. And so then I did end up studying with her at Northwestern and got my master's. And I also studied with Mr. Vamos for a shorter time in that period. And then just a funny side story, when we thought our story with the Vamoses was kind of complete, we just bought our house in June, and our realtor is Seth Vamos, the Vamos' son. So we can't get away. And I was actually recently invited by Mrs. Vamos to give a master class to her students, and that's happening next week. So I'm really honored to do that for her studio. They're amazing violinists. Then about the piece, I first heard this played at, I believe it was definitely at the Symphony Center, and it was a concert honoring the Vamoses' like lifelong teaching career. They've given up like their lives, their houses, their time, their instruments to their students. I'm sure everyone that studied with them has some story of how they just gave them all of their resources to help them be a better musician. They've certainly done that for me too. And I remember listening to the piece. I thought it was awesome, so I wrote it down and hope to play that someday. It's in my list of, gotta remember that one. And then it's coincidental that I married a violist. Just
That wasn't part of the, we have to be able to play this piece together.
Violist, check. Now prepare recital.
It just happened that way.
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing. And I'm really excited for this piece. I really like her music, and I think the personal story you shared is wonderful. So, and the last piece on the first half, which again is all duo music, all Emily and Bruno, is Johan Halvorsen's, really his only kind of well-known work, the Aposicalia, on a theme by Handel. I almost said Haydn. Haydn was earlier. Handel.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, could you tell us all what a Passacaglia is, or Passacaglia, and why this particular work has earned the nickname, the quote, the impossible duet?
Sure. Aposicalia is a short chord progression, and it's repeated over and over again with different improvisations or inventive variations. And this piece is famously difficult because it covers such a wide range of techniques, characters, colors. They're quick changes. You have to you play one phrase and then you're on to the next thing. We have ricochet bowing, tons of double stops. We actually play a little bit of ponticello, which is the bow close to the bridge and sounds scratchy, pizzicato, and towards the finale, playing way up in the stratosphere, and has double stops that get faster and faster and higher till the very end. So it's very intense.
Yeah, the Handel Passacaglia wasn't very popular when Handel composed it. It wasn't very well played or very well known, but Halvorsen's take of it just made it very popular because of the difficulty level it is, to play. He was a very good violinist at the time, and he really explored all ranges possible for bow stroke and even the actual range of the violin. I was gonna say, forgot. Oh yes, this ties in very well, I feel like, with the program, because Passacaglia being a typical back in the day, like a street dance in Spain. I feel like that really ties into the music composed by composers who listened to the music of the surroundings and made into compositions such as Dvorak or Gershwin, Marco Kohner, Edgar Meyer, and I feel like it's very fitting for the program.
That's great. That's great, and maybe a nice transition to the second half of the program, featuring Edgar Meyer and Marco Kohner, some selections from their album Appalachian Journey, that was also recorded with Yo-Yo Ma, which is a fabulous album. So if you're listening out there and you haven't checked that album out, I highly recommend it. Really, really awesome music. So these works, of course, we mentioned earlier, they're inspired by American folk traditions and structures of American folk music. And we bring our bassist in here into the second half of the concert. So maybe I'll kick the first question over to you, Kit. Can you tell our audience a bit more about kind of the stylistically what Appalachian Journey is like, and what some of the songs are like, and maybe from your perspective as a bassist, what what you're kind of focused on with these songs?
Yeah, this is really it's some of my favorite music. And when I spoke earlier about the music that I've turned to during the pandemic, this is it. This is the kind of stuff. A lot of folk tunes. It's not. There's nothing. There's not a lot of stress involved in this music. There's not a lot of. It's not the Sturm und Drang of classical composers, or or anything like that. It's just it's something that feels good. It's something that really relaxes the listener and at times the player when we're allowed to rest a little bit. But it goes back a long way, and even to Bruno was talking about Dvorak earlier, who started to develop the classical sound for America. In doing that, he went to the folk music, the folk traditions, and this is just a continuation of that, of classical musicians, certainly Yo-Yo Ma and Edgar Meyer, always switches genres depending on where he is at the time. Both, rooted in the classical traditions, where Mark O'Connor bringing in the folk a lot. Edgar Meyer obviously very well versed in folk music, bluegrass, and jazz. And that's, I think, the quintessential American sound of all of this, mixing together, all of these traditions coming together into a brand new sound. And the album Appalachian Waltz and Appalachian Journey do that beautifully, and in ways that it is brand new, but it sounds like the music has been there for hundreds of years. It sounds like nothing about it sounds new, but there's nothing else like it at the same time, which is really amazing. Seeing how long this tradition goes back to. And with the Appalachian connection, this goes back to like North Carolina folk tunes. The tradition in North Carolina folk goes back a long way, 150, 200 years, to these towns that were just stuck, isolated in the Appalachian Mountains. They don't really have railroads going in and out, so they were kind of a time capsule for many generations, and just as kind of the Appalachian Mountains are themselves. And that gets into how there's kind of like a purity to that. But then, you're taking it into the modern times and then mixing it with classical, you're mixing it with jazz, and it becomes an amazing thing.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I can't wait to hear you guys perform these. Emily, Bruno, do you have anything on style to add? I'm also curious about how you all went about choosing the selections as well, and the range of songs that the audience will experience.
Yeah, so Mark O'Connor is well known for his bluegrass playing and composing fiddle stuff. And I grew up playing fiddle when I was younger because I just loved playing as fast as possible. I just thought that was the best thing ever when I was younger. I've matured since then, but I really thought that was so fun. And I had a wonderful teacher, a fiddle teacher at the time, who let me play with his band. And I had my classical lessons, which were very serious. And then I had my bluegrass, and my teacher would like tell me these jokes on stage and try to get me to loosen up a little bit to have more fun, which I really appreciated because I can be so serious about what I'm doing. And then, Yo-Yo Ma and Edgar Meyer too are known for Yo-Yo Ma is known for his classical playing, and this album does such a great job of just putting these two together. It's very fiddly and bluegrassy, but also challenging. There are like crazy meter changes throughout the piece, so it's very interesting. It's not the ABA format that
Kit had to get used to a new tuning on his bass.
Yeah,
and you should talk about it.
Oh yeah, the Edgar Meyer he's such a prolific composer, but also his technical bass work is amazing. There's really not a comparable virtuose bass player out there. It's almost like it's a different instrument to him, even to how he tunes. Where most basses are tuned in fourths, E, A, D, G from the bottom up. Edgar Meyer takes initial tuning of the first string, but he also has the extension taking it back to a low C. But then the top three strings, he has up a whole step. So what we call solo tuning in bass. Anytime there's a concerto work or something where we're in front of an orchestra, we'll often use solo strings, which are a much thinner string and lighter weight string. And so it's a lot quicker to speak, and it kind of carries over the other instruments a little bit better than the orchestra tuning that is meant to be a foundation. It's meant to give everybody else a cushion to play off of, to give the root notes. But that's a thick, heavy string that's kind of hard to manipulate, hard to speak. With these solo strings, it's it's a very different beast. It's a very different instrument, which is a lot of fun for me. But it's also tricky to get your ears around at first, especially with the low string. He has the low string usually closed to a D. So then from the bottom up, it would be D, B, E, A, which is, almost to a pentatonic scale, which is perfect for a lot of this music that kind of bases itself in this pentatonic tuning, pentatonic kind of modal tuning of folk tunes. But it gives him a lot of options, a lot of new options as far as harmonics that he can use. With all the pieces, he's really creative in how he uses all these open strings. That it's really exciting technical work that has been a lot of fun to work on and a lot of fun to kind of wrap my head around. But it's written in such a way that lies so well on the instrument. He understands the instrument better than probably anybody in the world, and he uses that to his advantage. And all he fills in these really sneaky notes all the time in his little solos, and just adding a little bit more rhythm or a little bit more just interest in everything that he plays, and it'll just be something that happens to be right in place on the bass that he's set up so well. And I've been trying to channel that as much as possible for this music.
You sound great, Kit.
Thank you very much.
It's been a joy really to work on this program. We've spent so many hours working on the music itself, just adjusting to the bass and rewriting things, to looking. We're kind of like listening to what they did and trying to maybe go closer to what they did, because a lot of times it's not what's written, and sometimes you actually just don't go their way. We're kind of doing it our own thing, and I mean, the selection really came together. I mean, the choices that we made was really the songs that we enjoyed listening to. We used to listen to a lot of this album while having breakfast.
Yeah, just be on in the
morning.
background.
Nice breakfast album.
And we basically just picked the pieces that we kept listening back to and enjoyed the most. And so like, oh, this would be really fun to play. And this was a great opportunity when we wanted some more American music and a small ensemble. And we've known Kit for years, since Civic Orchestra together. And it's always a good time hanging out with you and playing with you. So it just worked out perfectly, I feel like.
And that kind of gets
really
into the last question I had for you all, which was about musical collaboration and collaboration amongst artists, which of course the three of you are. And, clearly this album is about the, Edgar, Meyer, Mark O'Connor, Yo-Yo Ma, plus the other guests they have on some of the songs. Clearly they're all bringing their own ideas to the table. I'm curious how that's worked out for you all, and what you enjoy most about collaborating with each other.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'm about to start. It's been so much fun. We've been working on this for such a long time. I'm sure we have just an endlessly long text thread going back and forth, and I've never worked on a program where we're all this excited about it for this long, where we just keep getting ideas going back to, I think it was early last summer Is that right? When we really started to like dig into this, and we just keep texting or emailing back and forth. It's like, well, what do you think about this? Because obviously we weren't meeting in person yet, and we keep working on this music, and then our different ideas going back and forth, because it is such a collaboration with this, and it's, well, we're trying to decode three of the greatest soloists on
Yeah.
their instruments, and we keep going back and forth, and it's like, well, what about this? What about this? And it's like, oh, well, I'm kind of hearing this, and we realize, one is a live version, one is the studio version, that we're trying to emulate, and so we've melded that together. I think in a really, really exciting way, and just trying to keep the fireworks of these three soloists that keep going back and forth. There's no hierarchy in this music, where a classical trio would be bass. You have the bass voice, you have the inner voice that's filling out the harmony, and then you have the top line, which will be the melody or the solo. And this keeps going back and forth, and in a way that you can kind of only do with folk music. When Emily has the this fiddle line that's the rhythm, just these kind of chopping motions, but all so much more exciting than most fiddle music has ever been before. And then Bruno takes over the solos here, and then there's just we're constantly passing the torch to each other, and it's just like this wheel of give and take. It's really, really exciting.
It's so fun because I'm, not used to bass solos for fiddle music,
Yeah.
and to
Neither am
really,
I.
oh, we have the upper strings in our house, and then when you come in and rehearse with us, with your bass, and you just like lay it down on those low strings, it's like so exciting to play with you and hear that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very special to make this our own. It's been a big challenge. We really have to. We're kind of forced to make this into our own thing, with even the music, the notation, the notes that we play, and the way we interact with each other, music directions, and just the experience, the expression level of this. It's a very high expressive level and interaction that we have with each other, and it's a really, really exciting program to play and to put together.
Yeah, a lot of decisions that we have to make together. They're just not in the music already.
Right. Yeah. They leave a lot of personal choice in the music. There's a lot of things you can't really write down folk music very well, and this is taking into the folk tradition where a lot of this has to be passed down by ear, and so we have to do a lot of this work just by ear and not by what's on the notes on the page. Are less important than the character behind it, than all these little nuances, these little filler notes or ghosted notes, or a lot of slides, a lot of bends. Yeah, the rhythms are not quite what they would line up on the page. The rhythms are all there's a freedom to it that can't be written down, and so we've been sharing ideas, trading ideas, trying to figure all that stuff out, which is really, really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm inspired. I really can't wait for this show. I mean, this from the Mozart to Appalachian Journey songs. I mean, I feel like we're covering quite a gamut of style and range of pieces. So, thank you all for contributing to that. Before we sign off, and I give everyone a little info about how to get tickets. Any last little thing you want the audience to grab onto as they're listening, whether they're able to come in person or via digital access?
I would say I think what's fun about those bends that we quickly mentioned in the Appalachian Journey songs, I actually had to listen really closely because I've heard of like slides that kind of go up but some of the slides that I have to do go down the other direction. So I would say listen for that, because that's a new technique for me.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, I say come enjoy. See, this is kind of taking through a time machine through music of what's possible on these same instruments. The fact that we can use the same instruments throughout the entire show, and they're all just as nothing's out of place.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's really exciting to see us all. See if you can pick out which instrument is playing at different times. If you're watching, close your eyes for a second and see if you can accurately pick out which instrument is playing at the time, because the music is amazing at just like flipping spots and turning over and just changing all the rules.
Yes, and I would say if you can look for also similarities, listen to similarities in the way composers interact with different parts. You can look at the Mozart duet, and you can see that those interactions, although the techniques, the composition techniques are very different than, let's say, Marco Kohner music. You can see that there's a lot of similar interactions in terms of interruptions and call and response and things like that. It just it's different music played as expressively and as interactive and connecting dots.
That's great. That's great. I think there's going to be a lot to listen to, and I know our audience is going to love it. So thank you all so much for taking the time to share really what's probably just the tip of the iceberg on this music, because there's so much to enjoy and so much to dig into. So thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And for those of you listening out there, head on over to qcso.org, or you can call our box office at 563-322-7276 to get your tickets, either in person, there's still some left, or digitally via digital access. So we hope you all can join us. And thanks for tuning in to this Signature Series preview. Take care and enjoy the show.